No, I mean, it's always been. I'd never had an interest to begin with. In the when I got to my engineering degree, when I started, I didn't have it. My first job, or first important job, was in consulting, and luckily they put us with a banking client. So we were working on a project with a finance client, and when we were there, I went to a Christmas party, and at the party, saw these guys who were, sharply dressed and whatnot. And I was like, who are those guys? And they were like, oh, those are investment bankers. I'm like, what do investment bankers do? And they're like, oh, they do da-da-da-da. So I said, I want to be one. And they're like, no, you can't because you don't have the right credentials. Right. So I said, okay, that's the case. So how can I improve? Instead of saying, okay, give up, I said, okay, the best way would be to improve my own credentials. And that's what I did. So I went to UCLA for business school, not MBA specifically, but master's in financial engineering. Did that for a year, and that took that 1 year to just absorb as much knowledge as I can and build a network, meet the gatekeepers, meet the people who can teach me and can improve who I am. And through their efforts, I was able to get interviews and then get into investment banking. So you'll never be 100% sure in life what you want to do, and very rarely will you ever be 35% sure either. You always have, maybe I want to do accounting, maybe I want to do consulting, maybe I want to be an engineer, all that stuff. But one of my MDs gave me an advice, was like, you pick that one stream that has the highest potential. So let's say the one that's 36% compared to the other 4 or 5 streams, and just go for it, on a 10-year path. And then it will automatically fit around you and get you to the pedestal that you seek. So my grandfather was in the Air Force. Right. My father was in the Army. And when I was graduating high school, I was very good at quantitative stuff. I was good at math, good at science, and actually had, perfect scores in high school in all of those subjects. So not knowing much and coming from because like my family came from a military background, so they didn't know much about professional careers like consulting, accounting, finance. So for them, all they knew was either sciences like, medical field or engineering, right? That was all they knew, or law. So seeing that, law was in a quantitative degree, medical was something that I wasn't interested in, so engineering became the right path. And, they thought because I was successful in high school in the numbers game, I'll be successful in this field as a career. And hence, I chose aerospace engineering. The other part of it was the personality of always, having a environment which is challenging. And to me, aerospace seemed like the hardest degree you could join, right? And that's the wrong approach. If you're gonna do things because you think it's the hardest and you'll get some points for doing that, then the next 40 years will be even harder, right? So so I learned that lesson early on, but I had to go through the engineering part of it and then join my career. It was like first of all, my parents weren't up for it. They were they didn't believe in the dream, let's just say. And so that was a struggle. But once I got there, it was kind of a challenge and a second chance. And in life, you don't get too many second chances in life. When you do get them, you make sure you knock it out of the ballpark. So once I got to UCLA, I wasn't the best student there, but I was one of the better students in the class. And I took the opportunity to not screw up, focus on my GPA, focus on the networking. And at the same time, if I didn't learn anything, I went the extra mile. While I was in engineering, because I wasn't passionate about it, I never went the extra mile, right? If I didn't understand a concept, I just hoped it would never show up on the exam, right? Here, if I didn't understand something, I was like, I better understand it because this is my second chance. So yes, parts of it were daunting because you knew this was your second chance and you had invested so much money in it and you wanted a certain job out of it. And just, slowly inching towards that goal kept it daunting, but it worked out at the end. The most important part is not every aspect of every job you'll like. Once you get an opportunity, be super grateful to the people who've helped you get there. Grateful to them, thank them. And then once you get there, don't, take it for granted. Take every day as your lucky day for being in that firm, whatever firm it is, right? And many times I didn't do that, but most times once I learned my lessons, I did that, right? So when I was at Morgan Stanley, every day I felt lucky, because people around me were much better than me. Much stronger candidates and stuff. So being around them, I felt like I have an opportunity which is rare. So respect the profession that you get. And once you respect the profession will respect you back. People around you will respect you. They will give you more opportunity. They will know that you're truly, genuinely interested in this. So, and that's something that I've learned over time, you know. And when you're young, you probably, you know, are a little more volatile. But as you grow older, you know, see that advice and it makes sense to you. So I think one thing I would say to people is like, you know, respect the profession. At the same time, you know, be super humble and genuinely interested in whatever work is given to you, right? Because if you're not happy, then you should not be there, right? Because I'm sure there's another 1,000 kids out there who would want to get that job. So wake up happy, do your work, and work hard every day, and it'll take you places. So employees are aware. Not all employees are, or employers are, you know, favorable to it initially. But once I, you know, started joining these teams, like my team at Morgan Stanley was super. You know, they like the aspect. They don't, you know, to them it wasn't just that you're an employee of the firm. You are your own brand. So how do you, you know, do you work at Morgan Stanley and also, you know, become a better person overall? And at the end of the day, you know, the biggest concern employers have, like any employer would, will he or she be able to do the job that he was hired for or she was hired for? Once he or she can do that, then go, you know, do your extracurriculars, right? So that's the biggest question. So to gain that first trust was the hardest part. And I'll give you an example. You know, when I joined Morgan Stanley, my first workshop that was scheduled after my start date was in Hong Kong, right? And it was a weekend workshop. And for me, that was the biggest challenge. How can I fly from San Francisco to Hong Kong, like a 15-hour flight, make it happen and come back on time and not skip any work, right? And in investment banking, given the work product and how long the hours are, it was tough as is. But the whole idea was if you just do the job that you're given, or if you just compete with the people that are around you, then you're just competing at a very local level, not a global level. So if I just do my job in investment banking, then I'm just an investment banker and nothing more. And there's thousands of us. You know, if you're a consultant at a top shop and you just compete with your fellow consultants, you're just competing with the local crowd, not the global crowd. So I said, if I want to make this happen and break barriers, I have to make this happen. So flew Hong Kong on Friday, got there Saturday, taught the workshop, went to the Hong Kong office, did, you know, for Morgan Stanley, worked from there, any work that I had. Sunday taught the workshop, the remaining part, did work, and then Monday morning flew back, right, Hong Kong time to San Francisco and landed Sunday night. So, and then Monday morning back to work, right? And nobody needed to know. Those who knew were impressed and were like, okay, if he can make that happen, then we can trust him. So gaining that first trust was the hardest part. And once you gain it, you don't lose it. And I think, you know, when you follow your passion and you keep on doing that, you'll have a much more successful career because you're building and developing not only your own brand, but doing a lot more. A lot of times it got cut pretty close, right? Sometimes it was easier, sometimes it wasn't. And you do feel the pressure. What I've realized is, you know, you will have fellow, you know, coworkers who sometimes might not appreciate your, you know, outside involvements and stuff like that. But, you know, as long as you do your job, carry your weight, and show them, you know, the big term picture, then it's easier. It gets easier. And that was the case at every firm, you know, from before this at Houlihan, then Morgan Stanley, and my next firm. I think, you know, they're very supportive. You know, they see that it never interferes with the work. And as personally, it was hard at first, right? Because you have to catch flights. You know, there's a bunch of, you know, majority of it is your own personal money. And you can't just cancel last minute because you have 1,000 students coming to a workshop. You can't just cancel the night before and say, hey, sorry, I can't come, right? So all those things combined add an extra level of pressure, but that is what global competition is, right? You have to compete at a higher level than what is presented to you because you're doing a job. My view on that was I always brought it in during the interview process. Right. The leader story was always core to who I am. So it wasn't like Morgan Stanley didn't know about it, right? They knew about it and they knew it from day one, actually from, you know, day minus 60 when I was interviewing, let's just say. So, being upfront and being honest was important. Obviously, once you do start, right, with some associates, you try to release only enough information to get it across the line. You don't need to tell them all the details because, there's no point having added stress, right? So I'll give you an example. One of the times I was, teaching in Boston, and my associate didn't know about it. But I was in Boston, I taught the workshop, I did whatever work he wanted, and then, after the work was done, he was like, hey man, thanks so much, how was your weekend? And I was like, it's pretty good, I was in Boston. He's like, what, you're in Boston? I was like, no need to stress, your work is done, I'm coming back tonight, it'll be fine. So less information was better, but keeping everybody at comfort was even more important.